Thank you so much for having me back. It's fun to come here, and my prayer was answered. I heard it was going to be 90 degrees today and something like 80% humidity, and I thought, I don't know if I can speak for an hour in that, and look what happened. Yes. It's beautiful. I mean, the weather's perfect, and then you got a fan on me too. This is kind of nice. So I'm so happy to be here. And you all know the theme for this week. What is it? Run the race. But what do you have to have before you start running? Well, training, but you have to be motivated. So I'm going to talk to you today about motivation. And this is one of the things that I hear so many people say is, but I don't feel motivated to do that. Or I don't feel motivated to do this. Well, I'm going to answer all of your questions about motivation today, and even the myths that you've heard. So let's get into it. So the first thing that we're going to look at is there's a lot of theories on motivation. Did I move the thing forward? Oh, I hit the wrong thing. There's a lot of theories on motivation. Am I getting this? Which one do I do? The right side? I think I'm doing that. Am I hitting that direction? Oh, there we go. So you can see right here, there's a lot of different theories on motivation, and I'm going to quickly go through these. This is kind of technical and academic, so it can be kind of boring. But you have the first theory on the left-hand side, and this is called the expectancy value theory of motivation. And this says that motivation is a function of the expectation of success and perceived value. So one of the ways, or one of the reasons that we're motivated is, I like to boil it down to hope. You're not motivated to do something unless you have hope of something good coming out of it, right? A lot of people aren't motivated because they do what? They expect the worst. And there's no hope, or they see something, doom and gloom in the future. So the next one has to do with attribution. And attribution, there we go. The next one, attribution, this has to do a lot with our feelings. Like, we have to attribute doing something with something good coming out of it. We want something good to come out of it. And so attribution theory has to do with reason. We need a reason for doing it. The next theory that we have for motivation is social cognitive. And this suggests that human learning and performance result from reciprocal interactions among people and behaviors and environmental factors, and also this idea of self-efficacy. Now, self-efficacy is the belief that I can do it. If I believe that I can do something, that motivates me to do it. If you think you can't do something, how motivated are you to do it? We're not likely to do it. And a lot of times we even have people in our life who give us the suggestion that we're not able to do things. Anybody ever hear from somebody, oh, you can't do that. Oh, that's not going to help you. Or, oh, you don't have anything to look forward to because everything turns out poorly for you. Right? Is it working now? I am hitting that one, I promise you. You had to touch it. Okay, it's been blessed. So the next reason is, can I even do this? That will boil social cognitive to, can I even do this? The next theory of motivation is goal orientation. And we tend to engage in tasks with concerns about mastering content. We want to be able to master the goal or do better than others, performance approach goal, or avoiding failure, performance avoidance goal. And then mastering goals appears to stimulate interest in deep learning, whereas performance approach goals, and then we're going to boil this down to performance avoidance goals, are associated with less favorable outcomes. So what does this have to do with? The outcome. I want to know that when I do this, I'm going to have a positive outcome that comes out of this. So then the last one is self-determination. I need to know that there's meaning and purpose that's going to come out of this. Not just out of the conclusion or the outcome of it, but I want to know that this adds meaning and purpose to my life. Isn't this why we do a lot of things? I want to know that this adds some meaning and purpose to my life. So these are just some of the theories that have to do with motivation that are out there. So this is all the boring research that's been done on it. But let's boil this down to what is motivation? It's the process whereby goal-directed activities are instigated, that's really important, and also sustained. So I need motivation to do it, but I also need motivation to continue doing it. Okay? So, what about fear though? Some of us, especially, in a religious setting, sometimes people like to use fear as a motivator. Have you ever heard people do this? Sometimes our parents like to do this. I remember one time when I was growing up, I had told my dad that I wanted to go to a certain place, and it just so happened that this place was about an hour away, and it was New Year's Eve, and I wanted to go with two of my friends, and I was in high school, and I suggested to my dad that we would come back sometime after midnight. Now, my dad is really protective and didn't want anything happening to me, and so he said, but I'm afraid that if you're out on the road on New Year's Eve, that somebody might be drunk and crash into you. Now, that's a motivator for a lot of us, to not do something, but motivation using fear tends to be very short-lived. It's not a long-term motivator. So let's look at some of the ways fear gets used. The news. Did you know the news utilizes fear to not just keep you from doing bad things, but to even get you to watch the news? I remember the tagline I heard years ago for the news, it's like Channel 4 News, and then the tagline was, all the news you need to know. And I thought, because I'm a thinker, I do this for a living. By the way, my expertise is in thinking. I'm not just a therapist, I teach people how to think. And if you've been to any of my previous seminars or heard me, I love to teach people how to think. And so what did I do when I heard that? I thought, all the news I need to know, they're going to put that into a half an hour? Everything I need to know is going to be in a half an hour. And then I started thinking about it more. And I thought, wait, they're only telling me the bad news. They are not telling me any of the good news that's going on, are they? And just that thinking, but what were they trying to do? Fear of missing out, right? FOMO, some people call it. That fear of missing out. If I don't watch the news, I might miss something that I need to know. And so what does that keep me doing? Every day I turn on the news. But does it really motivate me to do anything else except to turn on the news? No, maybe to argue with people afterwards about the next one, which is politics. Isn't fear used as a motivator for politics? Don't all of our candidates, I don't care which one you're talking about, they use fear to motivate us. What are they trying to motivate us to do? Vote for them and not the others. So they have to inundate us with all kinds of things we should fear so that we'll choose them to take care of all of the problems in the world. Have we ever had a candidate do that once they've come in office? Did they take care of everything? Sometimes they actually create more problems. But fear is a motivator in politics. How about relationships? Sometimes we use fear as a motivator in relationships. If you don't do this, I'm not going to do this, right? So that can be a way. Or if you don't do this, I'm not going to love you, right? Or if you don't do this, I'm not going to stick around very long. That can be a motivator too, but it's not a very long term. How about purchases? I love studying society. So several years ago, I think it was it J.C. Penney? People love coupons for some reason, and they love a good deal. Actually, I'm not going to use that example. I'm going to use a different one. We fear what makes us buy things. Limited time offer, right? If I think this is the only time I can purchase it, and then the deal's going to go away, I'm going to wind up buying more things than I ever intended. Even things, I had a friend who bought something once. Actually, she bought a coffee maker, and she got it at one of those big box stores, and it was right after Christmas, or right after Thanksgiving, those Black Friday sales, and she bought a coffee maker. The irony is she already had a nicer coffee maker at home. And then why did she say she bought it? Because she got a good deal on it, and she was afraid she wasn't. And I was like, but you already have a coffee maker, and it's even a better coffee maker than the one you just bought. But sometimes we do that. We're fearful that we're going to miss a good deal if we don't buy these things. How about religion? This used to be a huge tactic. Sometimes you swing the opposite direction after that, and then you go back later, back to fear again. But even fear, sometimes we hear preachers, and sometimes we hear, people within our congregations use fear to make a decision. It's interesting that the Bible says perfect love casts out fear, right? And isn't love a greater motivator than fear in terms of that? Now, it doesn't mean that you don't share the truth with people, because love also tells you that things are going to happen and consequences, but we do it in love rather than, oh, they're going to do it if they're scared. That's a different form. And even change. One of the reasons we don't change because we're fearful of the outcomes of change. By the way, most people don't change because something is so hard to do, especially in terms of even keeping the Sabbath, maybe when they never have, or doing something that they've never done before. Do you know what it is? It's fear of what they might be missing out if they do that. You're not asking them to change so much just the day of the week. It's all the people that are affiliated with all the activities they do the rest or on that day that they're going to miss out on. So what's the best way to motivate them? Show them a new community or a loving group that they can do other things with versus, oh, I'm going to be fearful if I change that I won't get to do all these other things. So fear is a huge motivator. But I love this verse. This is one of my favorite verses to share with people. For God has not given us a spirit of fear. So if God hasn't given us a spirit of fear, where does fear come from? Satan. But instead, what does he offer us? Power? What overcomes fear? Do you feel as fearful when you're powerful or when you feel powerful? I don't fear things when I feel powerful. Many things in the past that I feared, I don't fear now because I feel powerful. Maybe I'm equipped with certain tools. Maybe I have experience that I didn't have before, and I feel powerful. I don't look powerful all the time, but I feel powerful because of the tools that I have. The second one, love. When you truly love someone, can you ever fear them? What they might do? Do we fear people mostly because of what they can physically do to us? Or is it the fear that we have of what they can do mentally and emotionally to us? But if I love them, am I worried about what they can do mentally and emotionally to me? I have sympathy and empathy for them more so than I have fear towards them. And then the last one, a sound mind. A lot of times we fear things because we don't feel sane enough to handle them, right? What do I do if this person says this? What do I do if this happens? We don't feel like we have a sound mind to be able to contemplate a creative solution to the problem. And so when we fear, that fear is from Satan. And who went before a great giant as though he didn't have any fear? I think of David. Did he not have power? Not because he was a huge guy. He had power because he had proved God in his life. He had love. He had love towards God's people that made him stand up and fight for them. And he also had a sound mind because he had spent many a time with God in his life. And what does God do? He clarifies things. He puts things in their right place. And so you see things in their proper perspective. Let's look at some myths about motivation. Let's not look at fear anymore. We're going to look at motivation over fear. So let's look at some myths, because I hear a lot of things that people say that keep them from doing things. So the first myth is, I have to wait till I'm motivated. How long are you planning on waiting? I see a lot of people that are waiting to be motivated before they do something. Do you know that's a myth? To wait to do something until you're motivated? What happens? You just spend a lot more time waiting. Do you know what? You want to know what the truth is? Motivation is actually the effect, not the cause. We don't have our ducks in a row. It is only by moving that motivation is actually possible. Now that sounds illogical to some of us that don't feel motivated yet. So how do I do this? Well, there is a woman by the name of Mel Robbins, and she wrote a book. It's actually a very popular book. It's called The 5-Second Rule. And the 5-second rule goes like this. When you have an idea in your mind that you want to do something, or that you need to do something, maybe you need to get over something, maybe you need to start the process of something, get up and get out there. You just heard talking about evangelism. Do you know what your brain is hardwired to do? Your brain is hardwired to do two things. One, keep you comfortable, and two, keep you safe. And I don't mean safe like a monster's coming at you, but just keep you safe from anything difficult. And so if your brain is hardwired to make you comfortable and keep you from difficulty or danger, what do you think your brain is going to do right after you have that idea that you need to do something? It's going to come up with all kinds of reasons and excuses not to do that thing. So if you see somebody across the aisle in the airplane, or that you need to talk to, or you want to talk to about Jesus, or give a glow track, or something like that to, what is your brain automatically going to do? Oh, Amanda, you don't want to do that. What if they think you're crazy? What if they look at you like that you're weird or something like that? What if they yell and say, no, I don't want that? So what do? I back up and go, yeah, that's probably not a good idea. I don't want to do that. But if you know that that's what your brain is hardwired to do, why is it hardwired to do that? Because the most important thing day to day is making sure we're safe. Not necessarily comfortable, but safe. So our brains do that. But in actuality, did you know that you can hack your brain when it wants to do that? You can count down backwards from 5. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. What is that doing? What that's doing is taking your mind off all the excuses and getting it amped up and ready to go to do that thing that you need to do. So you can practice this with your spouse. My husband and I have done this before. Do you know one of the hardest things for me to do in the winter time when it's cold, and I know you're all laughing because I'm from California, but when it's cold, I do not want to get out of bed when it's dark in the morning and it's cold outside of my bed. And so I have to practice this. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, you're getting ready to go. I also don't like making phone calls. I'm just not, I didn't even like texting when it first came out, but now I'm sorry to say I prefer it over calling people. It's a nice way to put it out there, and then I just wait and hope for an answer, but I don't have to sit there and talk and that sort of thing. I talk all day, you know. I want an excuse not to talk when I don't have to. But what I do when I have to make that important phone call, I count down. And I do it because I know it needs to be done. And that's what we call the 5-second rule. So you're actually motivating yourself. It's the same thing we do when a rocket gets launched. Is everybody thinking about all the problems that could happen when they're counting down backwards? How about New Year's Eve? Are you thinking about all the problems that could be happening next year? No, you're getting excited because you're counting down. So that's one way to hack your brain so that you actually do the thing you need to do when you're trying to come up with all sorts of excuses. Another thing that you can do that also helps me is I think of all the good things that can happen versus all the negative things. So it's another way that I hack my brain. But this is really important because motivation doesn't come because you feel motivated. You have to actually start, and then the motivation comes when you get the ball rolling. I love this verse, though. In 2 Corinthians 8:11, it says, "Now there perform the doing of it, that as there was a readiness to will, so there may be a performance also out of that which ye have." So what happens? I'm willing to do it. I have to be willing to do it. I don't have to feel like I want to do it, but I just have to be willing to do it. Then as I perform it, then a performance comes out of it. Now that sounds kind of funny. You perform it and then a performance. But the performance is the continuing of it. If I'm willing and I start, a performance comes out of it. I continue to keep going at it. It's just pushing the ball to the edge, and once it goes over, it's going to continue to go. The more you do something, the more you get motivated to do it. How about this one? You're either motivated or you're not. Some people look like they're really motivated, don't they? They're like, oh, they do this all the time. They're good at it. I'm just not good at it, right? But what if motivation isn't a personality or character trait? Did you know that some people aren't just motivated and other people aren't? We all are motivated. You just have to figure out what motivates you. Even people who sit around all day and do nothing, they're motivated to do something. You just have to figure out what it is that they're motivated to do. And sometimes it's not what you think it is, it's something else if you're paying close attention. I worked with a woman years ago when I was working in the group home, and she was not motivated to quit smoking. And one of the tactics that had been used for her is her doctor, what do you think he told her about her smoking? If you continue to smoke, you know what's going to happen to you? Cancer and all these other physical, medical issues. Do you know she never stopped smoking because of that? So I talked to her about it because I was concerned. She's getting older and she had a lot of health problems and everything. And I thought to myself, what would motivate her? And I asked her this question. I said, you know, what would motivate you to stop smoking? And she didn't think anything would. But I knew something about her. She loved flea markets. Loved flea markets. In fact, her car was always full of junk that she got to go sell at her flea market. And you know what I thought? She is actually motivated by something to quit smoking. She just doesn't know. Smoking is expensive. I don't know what taxes are on cigarettes here, but they're really expensive. It's almost like another pack of cigarettes, just the tax on top of the cigarettes in California. But she spent a lot of money that she didn't have on cigarettes. And I said, how much do you think you would save in a week if you didn't smoke? And she was like, well, I don't know. I said, what if you could use all that money to buy stuff to sell at your flea market? You should have seen her eyes. Ooh. Wow. And I thought, how sad. Her body isn't important to her, but buying junk to sell at a flea market is her motivation to do this. Now, I don't know how long that lasted, but it was the closest thing I could find to something that would be motivating to her. Does it mean just because medical issues isn't a motivator that she's just not a motivated person to quit and she should just continue to smoke? No, we all have something that will motivate us. It's just a matter of time to figure out what it is. How about rewards increase all kinds of motivation? Sometimes businesses incentivize their employees. Sometimes students get rewards to do things. I learned that this was a myth a long time ago. Anybody in here a teacher? I used to teach a psychology class at Weimar University, and I noticed whenever I had students that weren't doing too well in the class, I thought, oh, I'll give them extra credit so that they can get a better score at the end of the semester. Well, that didn't work. Do you know who does all the extra credit? The A students. So all I was doing is helping my 98 percentile student get to 104%. And then the 64% was just sitting there like, that's not enough. It's not going to get me an A anyway, so who cares? So rewards don't always incentivize everyone. Different kinds of things are motivating for different kinds of people, just like I suggested with that woman. It depends on the situation too. One person might be motivated to do extra credit in this class, but not motivated to do extra credit in this class. And you know what motivates you. Many of us are intrinsically motivated. Remember, we talked about if there's meaning and purpose that comes out of this. I don't care if you give me praise and accolades. I don't care if you give me money, but I want to know that I've mastered something. Other people, you can give them all the praise in the world and they'll do anything for you if you do that. But it doesn't even work all the time. So do you know what is most likely to motivate you and even the people in your life if you want them to be motivated? How about motivation is enough for success? There are some very highly motivated people that are still not successful because of this reason. It's actually skills and strategies with motivation that are required to make somebody successful. Now, does that mean you have to be already skilled or mastered at something to be successful? No, you can actually learn that. And this book, The Motivation Myth, How High Achievers Really Set Themselves Up to Win, Jeff Hayden talks about this. There's 3 things that you need to do in addition to motivation. One is find somebody who's already good at the thing that you want to do. Find somebody who's already good at it. They don't have to be a professional at it. They don't have to make a lot of money at it. They don't have to make any money. They just have to be good at it and really understand what it is. And follow their plan. Literally, specifically ask them, what did you do to get to this point? And he uses the example of a runner. If you know somebody who's really good at running, ask them, what did you do to get really good at running? Have them write it all down, or you write down everything that they did to become a good runner, and you do exactly that. Do exactly what they do. Now, set your goal, follow the plan, and the second thing, most importantly, is forget the goal. What happens if something takes too long? We often get discouraged. Oh, this is taking too long. This is why we forget the goal. Enjoy the process of getting there. Far too many people, we want to go from A to B in no time at all. We don't appreciate the value of following the plan and just getting good at it. So that's the next thing that we do. And then the last thing to understand is you can do anything for 2 weeks. You can stick to a plan for 2 weeks. Everybody can do that. If you follow the plan, you can stick to it for 2 weeks. And then you will be on your path to success. But you have to follow the plan, of course. The next one, all praise increases motivation. We already learned a little bit about that. What's more important is cultivating a growth mindset. That leads to increased motivation. And this book by Carol Dweck, it's called Mindset, The New Psychology of Success, How We Can Learn to Fulfill Our Potential. She talks that you can praise effort, resilience and pushing through. And that's even better than praising just how well somebody did. And this is something that we should actually be doing with our kids too. Far too often we praise kids for being successful at something. But then what happens if they've been successful for a while and then they don't do well? They may not be motivated to continue. I've seen students even who were really successful in school, and they get through school, but then maybe they get fired or let go of their job, and all of a sudden they don't know what to do with themselves, even though they had all of this great motivation and success along the way, because they didn't learn to cultivate a growth mindset. Challenges are just that. They're challenges, and we can overcome those things. So if we praise the effort that somebody puts in, even when they fail, if we praise their resilience, wow, I saw you really push through that even though you had a hard time and you didn't give up, man, that's what really impresses me. That's more important than if they succeeded, because you want them to continue to be motivated to try. And then pushing through their challenges, and even reframe challenges. You didn't fail. Did you see how you didn't actually fail at that because you tried and you continued with it? And not everything works out the way that we want to, but I love to see you continue to try. How good does that feel, even when you failed at something? But then again, what is failure? Isn't it not trying at all? I think that's the better definition of not trying at all. That's ultimate failure. We didn't even get off the ground. This is a quote from her. We like to think of our champions and idols as superheroes who were born different from us. Isn't that why we like superheroes? Like, I can live vicariously through their flying and teleporting and all that stuff. Because ultimately, I don't have to do that, but I can just enjoy the process of it. She says, we don't like to think of them as relatively ordinary people who made themselves extraordinary. Those are my favorite stories of people just like me who go through difficult times. I want to learn the process of what were they thinking? What did they tell themselves to overcome that situation? I'm not really impressed with Superman. One, I know he doesn't exist. But two, what chance do I have of being like that? But somebody that I hear, I saw a book in the ABC, 1,000 Shall Fall. Anybody read that story? Really amazing story. Are those not people just like us who went through difficult times, and what they told themselves to have a growth mindset, to be resilient, to overcome those challenges? And a lot of what we do need to tell ourselves is what God can do in those situations. That's motivating to know he can do for me just like he did for that person. And that's what the Bible is there for, too. I want to share this. I'm not sure if this will play. I don't even know how much time we have. How much time do I have? 15 minutes. Let's see if this will... It won't play? Okay, I'm just going to tell you about this kid. You can watch this story later, I'll tell you. It came from a video. It's called On the Road with Steve Hartman. If anybody's ever heard of that program. If you want to hear good news, watch these episodes. If you don't need to watch anything, by the way, but if you're going to watch something, this is something good to watch. This boy here, he was in high school. He could make just about any team he wanted to. If he wanted to play football, he could make the varsity football team. If he wanted to play basketball, he could make the varsity basketball team, the soccer team, you name it. He was really good at those sports. Do you know the one thing he wasn't good at? Swimming. He did not even know how to swim. So you know what he did? He joined the swim team. Why would somebody do that when they can excel at other sports? Why would you join the swim team when you can't swim? Because he decided that he didn't want anything he wasn't good at to stop him. So he joined the swim team, and he barely made it across the pool the first time he practiced. But he wasn't willing to let that stop him. So what he did is he learned how to swim. And ironically, the swim team wasn't that good of a team, because why else would they let him on the swim team? They had no other kids to pull from at the school. Nobody wanted to be on it. They barely cut it at any competition. Like, if the kids could get across the pool, they're just like, yay, we actually got the kids all across the pool by the end of the race. But by the end of his senior year, he took his team to the finals, or nationals, I think it was. And to hear him talk, he realized at a young age, he must have had some great parents. They're not interviewed in this. He realized, though, that he knew that if he's going to overcome things in his life, he needed to learn how to overcome them now. So what was his motivation? Meaning and purpose, that he was going to be resilient, that there was going to be an outcome, and that he could do it. He learned that in other areas of his life. So can we motivate other people, though? Sometimes it's hard because maybe we're motivated, but there are other people in our lives who aren't motivated. And what do we do with them? Well, let's look at that. So there's something called motivational interviewing. And motivational interviewing actually goes by the acronym RULE. And the rules are, there's 2 R's. The first rule is resist the writing reflex. Roll with resistance is the second R. Understand a person's own motivations, listen with empathy, and empower the person. So we're going to look at each one of these. 1, resist the writing reflex. That's the first of the 2 R's. Resistance is a signal to change strategies. When you get resistance, when you're trying to help somebody, some of us, we're like hammers, and we just love to keep pounding in the same thing, the same way, every single time, even though we're getting resistance. So resistance is actually a signal to change strategies. And sometimes, by the way, resistance isn't always bad. But if you meet resistance or notice an argument beginning, you may have misunderstood their readiness to change or another issue. Labeling is unnecessary. Don't say somebody's non-compliant or unwilling. Those should be barred from our mental vocabulary. Arguing is also counterproductive. Confrontation does not motivate people. We love to do it, but it's not the greatest motivator. The other person's attitudes are shaped by their words, not yours. Sometimes we say, you're not motivated, and they say, I am motivated. So pay attention to the words they're using. If they're saying, I'm motivated, ask them what you're motivated. Sometimes one of the things I like to do is I like to say, what would motivate you? We'll get to that in a little bit. So the other thing is roll with resistance. Use momentum to your advantage. I talked to I talked to a realtor once, and I remember she said to me, sometimes when you go into a house and somebody's looking at that house and they say, oh, I wouldn't like this, and I would change this, and I would do that, that's actually a sign that the person is actually interested in the house. Did you know that? It sounds like they're not because they're picking apart everything. But what they're actually telling you is they're imagining living in that house, but they're seeing all the reasons why maybe they didn't like this way or that way. But if you just take that as resistance and you start arguing with them, or you say, oh, well, obviously they don't like this house, let's move on to the next one, you might have just lost a sale. Maybe they're just asking in their own unique way, well, how would I fix this? Or what could I do with this? Maybe that wouldn't be too expensive, it would be easy to do in terms to get there. Shift perceptions, meet resistance with reflection. It sounds like I'm not understanding everything about this issue. I've had people say that. I don't know if I want to do this because of X, Y, or Z. And then I say, well, tell me about that. I think it's interesting because if you look at, militaries, when they meet resistance, what do? Do they give up and walk back? No, they pay attention. What are the weaknesses? What are the advantages that I have here? What could I do with this? We give up too easily sometimes. So meet resistance with reflection, and this seems really important to you. You want to get to know the person a little bit more because the more information they share, the more you have to work with too. So don't, just because somebody's resistant doesn't mean that that's bad. Invite new perspectives. Don't impose them. Emphasize choice and control. Let people know that they have a choice. Sometimes I'll say, I know that it doesn't seem very exciting to you right now. Is there something that would make it exciting? Or you have the choice right now. It's up to you. I'm not going to force you to do it. Sometimes when people know they have control over it, they lose that resistance in the first place. The other person is a valuable resource for finding solutions to problems. This is something, let them talk. Let them share what's important to them. Understand their motivation. I have patient, but it's just the person. An early step in motivational interviewing is determining a person's concept of self-efficacy. That means their ability to feel like they can do it. And you can use a 1 to 10 scale. I do this with couples sometimes when they come in for counseling, couples counseling. I ask them, sometimes together, sometimes individually, how motivated are you to work on this marriage? Do you think they always agree? No. One might be, I'm a gung-ho 10. The other one would be, well, I think I'm probably about a 7. What does that tell me? One of them has some resistance, and what is that about? I'm listening, though. I want to understand what their motivation is and why they're only at a 7. And then you can ask this question, on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to do this behavior? And then if the person answers a 2, a helpful response might be, what would it take for you to be at a 3? Notice I didn't say, what would it help for you to be at a 10? That's a huge jump, but just a little bit. We have a saying in our practice, just 1% improvement. That doesn't sound too hard, 1% improvement. Rather than trying to encourage by saying, you can do this. That's kind of, it's too easy to say, but it doesn't help them think about the process that they want to do. One way that we look for motivation is I ask my clients, I know it changed a little bit on the screen here, but I ask my clients to do a values assessment. I give them a bunch of different topics and I ask them, tell me what's important to you in regards to health. Is health the same for everybody? For one person, working out 3 hours a day at the gym is what they consider health. Another person might be a plant-based diet with all kinds of supplements and vitamins and that sort of thing. Those are two very drastically different motivations. And you don't want to use one for the other person necessarily. Money can be a motivator, but you have to know what's important to the person in terms of money. My version of value of money is not the same as yours. And all these things are different ways that we can find out what our motivations are. Then we want to listen with empathy. Acceptance facilitates change. Now, a lot of times when we hear the word acceptance, we think that it means I have to agree with somebody. In therapy, we call this radical acceptance. It's radical because I'm accepting that you're right there and I'm right here. I'm not accepting the way you do it necessarily and saying I want to do it the same way or that that's okay. I'm just accepting that you've said what you said and where you are. I'm not trying to make it different. Reflective listening is fundamental. Be accepting of ambivalence, meaning I don't know which way to go, and respectful of the person. Sometimes time. This is one of the beautiful things about Christ. He never seemed to be in a hurry. Have you noticed that? When you read about Christ, he never seemed to be in a hurry, even though he had limited time on this earth. He went away and he talked to God. All these different things that he did, he seemed to be like he had innumerable minutes in his life to do these things, and hours and days. Sometimes when you're too pressured, that other person isn't motivated anymore. And ambivalence is normal. We're very attached to our behaviors. We don't like to give up very easily. Also, we want to empower the person. Belief that change is possible is an important motivator. A lot of my clients come to me and they've been to many, many other people before seeing me. And they're already feeling like this is just how it's going to be. I'm not going to get any better. And just hearing from me, I've seen people change. and even telling them stories of people who have changed. That's a great motivator. This is why we have all of those infomercials. Do you know there's psychology to infomercials? If I can relate to you, you're just like me and you got better, or you got rid of all of your wrinkles, or you lost weight or whatever like that, then I think maybe I can. That's a great motivator to see that somebody thinks it can happen. And readiness and self-efficacy are the best predictors of success. Not my readiness, but the other person's readiness. Their belief that they can do it. I can't make you believe that you can do it, but I can give you some tools to get there. And that's even stronger than social support. And the person is responsible for choosing and carrying out actions to change. If you're doing all the work, this is another rule we have in therapy. If I'm doing all the work, I'm doing too much work. Sometimes I just have to wait until they're ready. Sometimes they've even said, like, let me know when you're ready. I believe this can happen, but I know you have to decide that. And it's funny how many times they'll come back and go, okay, I'm ready now. It's like, well, that's all we needed is for you to be ready. I've been ready, that's why I'm sitting here all day. I want to help people. And hope lies in a range of alternative approaches available. Successful changers use a wide variety of techniques. And you heard that even in the presentation before me. When it comes to evangelism, not everybody's the same. Different ways for different people. But I think the biggest thing is when we have an identity change. I like this quote by Ellen White. It is a law both of the intellectual and the spiritual nature that by beholding, we become changed. The mind gradually adapts itself to the subjects upon which it is allowed to dwell. It becomes assimilated to that which it is accustomed. And when we spend time with Christ, we become changed. And sometimes the question we can ask ourselves is, who would I be if I was the person that I wanted to be? Who would that look like? What would I do this week? Just for this week. Remember, we learned from Jeff Hayden, if I can do it for 2 weeks, what would I do this week if I was my ideal self? And also, who would I be if I was the person God created me to be? What would he have me to do? Not for myself, but for him. I like that quote also. She says, his biddings are enablings. A lot of what I've shared with you is stuff that I need to do or I have to do, but who actually puts it in me to do those things? God does. And even we have in Paul's writings where who gives us the faith to even exercise faith? We get that little bit of faith God gives us, and that's the only way we can even exercise the faith. So where does the will come from? I don't come up with my will. It's God's will. He puts it in me, and then I do that will as well. And have I asked Christ to abide in me and then walked in that faith? And I'll leave you with this. David asked for a renewed spirit. He wanted God to put a new spirit in him. And I think of motivation that way. Sometimes we don't have it in and of ourselves, but we can ask God to put that motivation in us. He can give us the reasons. Who knows us better than God does? He knows us so well. He knows us better than we know ourselves. And so when we can't do this ourselves, when we're not motivated, he can put it in us to do that. And we can ask for him to renew a right spirit of motivation in us, even when we don't have it. So some references before I go. These are some things that you can do. This is a website that you can look at for if you want to motivate students. I'm sure it works for all kinds of people as well. There's another book, Get It Done by Eilert Fishbach. She's done a lot of research on motivation as well. One of my favorite books on helping other people be motivated, even when we can't do all of the work for them, is Ministry of Healing. I think this is a great book because it helps you understand the mindset of so many people who struggle in this world. And if we understand that, we know how to work with those people better too. And of course the Bible, because there's all kinds of stories and meaning and purpose in God's plan. We don't always see the end from the beginning, but especially even Hebrews 11, why did all these people do it? Because God asked them to, and even if they couldn't see the end, they knew that God would fulfill his plan in their lives. So let's bow our heads as we pray. Dear Father in heaven, I know that not all of us feel like doing the things that you want us to do. And also there are many of us who have people in our lives who don't feel like doing the things that you want them to do. And in an ideal world, we would be so much closer to heaven, or heaven would have already come because we would have already done the work. But Lord, we're distracted, we're unmotivated, we're tired, we're overwhelmed. But we ask, Lord, that you would put in us a new spirit, that you would right our hearts and make them new for your will and your way. And we ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen.